Let's see here. There we go. Okay, you're
Great.
live. You're live and being recorded.
Thank you so much, and welcome everyone to the June 22nd, 2020 episode of Virtual Hot Topics. My name's Jane Parker. I'm County Supervisor for District 4, and our topic this evening for Hot Topics is to talk about the bonds that were recently released that will allow most of the blighted buildings that are still present on Fort Ord to be able to be removed. So that was just, those bonds were just sold, I think, last week, and have made available about $30 million to help the communities of Seaside and Marina to remove the existing buildings that are in their jurisdictions. And we're going to be joined this evening by Council Member Gail Morton from the City of Marina, the Mayor of the City of Seaside, Ian Oglesby, and the Executive Officer from the Fort Ord Reuse Authority. I see that Gail Morton has joined us, and I can go ahead and invite her to talk in just a moment. And I will just let everyone know that Josh Metz and Mayor Oglesby are currently attending a LAFCO meeting where the topic is the Fort Ord Reuse Authority, and so they are going to have to stay there for a little bit longer, and they will join us when they free up. So we will also, if we have time, I can talk to you a little bit about what's on the agenda for the Board of Supervisors meeting tomorrow. Lots of stuff, and also we can talk a little bit about the latest guidance from the county as it relates to expanding the group of people that you have been socializing with. And it gives guidance about how to sort of expand your circle safely. And anyway, it's something that I've been asking for quite a while. And I think it was on Friday of last week that the health department released that guidance. So we'll take a couple of minutes at the end if we have time to talk about that. But I do want to welcome Council Member Gail Morton from Marina. And Gail, as you heard, our other guests who were going to talk about the bond issuance are not here. So you can get us started and you know, really talk about what the issues are, what the benefits are of this bond issuance from the perspective of the City of Marina. And I know that within the jurisdiction of Marina, there are some buildings that are owned by the Transportation Agency and Monterey Salinas Transit. And so if you wanted to talk at all about those, I would encourage you to do that. But please start where you would like to, and let the folks who are tuned in learn what the you know, what the benefits are, and even some of the process that we've been through trying to get these bonds issued.
Thank you very much, Ms. Parker. And so FORA and its wisdom and what it has done for the last 26 years failed to take into account how we're going to take down all of the buildings that were left behind by the Army. And about a year ago, last November, the FORA board started thinking about maybe we could issue bonds encumbering what's called tax increment to generate funds for the jurisdictions to take down the buildings on former Fort Ord. And what's really important to the public, number one, is they're panicked and you have a tax bond. Are your taxes going to go up? And the answer to that is no. Fort Ord Reuse Authority operated on collecting what's called tax increment. It's a special amount of the taxes that were able to be used by the FORA board to implement the base reuse plan. And when FORA sunsets, which it does in 8 days, on July 1, that tax increment would have gone away and the funds would have gone back into the coffers of the taxing authorities in a proportionate share. So instead, what happened is FORA said, geez, if we encumber those taxes before FORA goes away, then we can use that money, basically collecting money each year, and apply that towards taking down these blighted buildings, which is in the millions and millions of dollars. And after significant wrangling among all the jurisdictions, not because we had any control over it, but it's the state is involved, the county is involved, each jurisdiction is involved, we finally came to an agreement and issued the bonds in the nick of time, June 11th, and those bonds will yield approximately $21,500,000. In the meantime, FORA is going away, and we have to spend about $4 million of those bonds on fulfilling FORA's obligation to fund its retirement program. So $4 million of that going directly to California Public Employees Retirement System to make sure that FORA has done everything it needs to do to pay its obligations before it goes away. What that leaves then is about $17.5 million of bond money that is divvied up between Seaside, Marina, and agencies such as MST, which is Monterey Salinas Transit. Marina Coast Water District is getting some, and TAMC, the Transportation Agency of Monterey County, are getting some. So if you go stand anywhere on Fort Ord and you see all of those blighted buildings that we're trying to take down, you have to add up that that's a lot of money. For the city of Marina, what's left in our city is about $55 million to get it down. And what we're going to get out of this bond issuance is 14.5 million, rough numbers. So it's not a complete answer, but it's the biggest chunk of money that our city has, and the only source that we were able to come up with in even coming up with any funds to take down old buildings. So we're excited about that. It's actually going to happen. That's the overview. Seaside got 39%, I think, of the total. So you take the 17.5 million, and obviously I didn't do their math because I'm in Marina, and so I was just watching my math. But we are very excited. What we expect to happen is the buildings that are along 2nd Avenue between REI and Jane Parker's current office, is we're going to be able to get so much of that down. The whole idea and why people wanted to put this money behind a bond issuance is that if you can get rid of all of that eyesore, we're expecting people will want to come to Marina, Seaside, the county areas, and live and invest money in businesses being here. Everybody has been working to try to get investors into their jurisdictions. Josh used to be the economic development director before he became our executive director at FORA. And he was like constantly inviting businesses and CEOs and people to industries, to Marina, driving them around to Seaside, to the county, driving these people around, and they're looking and going, who wants to live in this place when you have such decrepit buildings and they're just decaying, and it's very difficult for people to see beyond what's there. So getting these buildings down can be the first time that people are going to be able to come. Those same industry people, the same investors, the same people that want to live, and they're going to be able to say, oh, this is what it looks like. And it's beautiful, and there's opportunity. And it's going to give us all a foot up as a regional location for us to thrive and to improve our economy. So that's kind of the overview. And Josh, I'm throwing it to Josh because Josh is the executive director for the last 6 months for Fort Ord Reuse Authority, and he's been a tremendous asset for us all. And he's actually been at the helm as we got this issue across the goal line. So Josh, thank you for that, and tell me what I missed, and
you did.
the public wants to know.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
And actually, Josh, before you get started, I'm just going to interrupt. I want to welcome our folks who are participating via Facebook and encourage both Facebook participants and Zoom attendees to feel free to put questions in the question and answer and chat area. And as those come up, we will lob them to Gail and to Josh and to Ian when he gets here. So go ahead, Josh. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you, Jane and Gail and members of the community. Wendy, I see you're there. And yeah, it has been an honor for me to serve in this capacity over the last 6 months, and for the 6 years prior to that in different capacities with the Fort Ord Reuse Authority. The majority of that time in a role in economic development, which, as Gail Morton described, had repeat visits from really interesting potential companies here. We had a French cosmetics company, for example, that was sniffing around pretty hard here, and just call it the curb appeal would be something that people had a hard time seeing through. So, just in the last 6 months, there has been activity for folks who might be in the region. If you come off of Highway 1 now and onto Imjin Parkway, you'll see on the hillside that has, as long as I've been here, there's been these old World War II barracks there. Those are now removed, and it really transforms the landscape in terms of what you could see being possible. And I think, provides a great example of what can happen once this money comes in and is put to work in the other areas down 2nd Avenue and other parts of the base that will be, those buildings will be taken down. And I think to Gail's point of stimulating economic development and economic activity, on that hillside above the FORA offices there, it's often referred to as C-Deck Hill. It's got a great vantage point and view of the bay and everything. We know that there's real interest and activity underway to bring another hotel in there, to have other business activities potentially happen there, and additional housing. So that's just one example. And all of this area in Marina that is part of the that has the remaining buildings is part of this specific plan called the Dunes on Monterey Bay. So there's already a interest and an invested party working hard to bring that all in. So that, I think, just paints a picture of what's possible once these funds that we're talking about today become available. So Gail did a great job of summarizing all of that, but I'll just take a look back here, if it would be helpful to get into kind of a breakdown of what has happened. Indeed, there was a total of $30,705,000 that were brought in with this bond issue, which took place about, I think it was about 7 or 10 days ago now. And then there's been a process of bringing that to closure, and I believe the accounts will be funded Thursday night. So all the work of the FORA board and member jurisdictions, staff, and a whole team of very sophisticated financial people, attorneys, various insurance folks, that it takes to get this done. For me, it was the first time I'd been through this process, and it was quite a path. I think it so all of that money will come in on Thursday and be directly allocated into different accounts that were agreed upon by the board, and in the percentages that Gail referenced. I can summarize those for you here. I've got a reference here. Give me one moment to pull that back up. Okay, I had it here, and now here it is.
And while you're finding that, Josh, the other thing I want to mention is that the FORA board, is made up. The Fort Ord Reuse Authority board is made up of people who represent cities other than Seaside and Marina. We've got Monterey, Pacific Grove, Carmel, and there was a general agreement among all of them, even though they weren't going to directly benefit in receiving the bond proceeds, that the presence of these dilapidated buildings was a challenge and a detriment for them as well, because when visitors come to our area, that's one of the first things they see is that area around Fort Ord. And so to get those buildings down, the folks in Pacific Grove and Monterey and Carmel were saying, yeah, let's get those buildings down. We don't want people coming to visit our area to have that be, those buildings be the first things they see. And then of course, California State University, Monterey Bay got started in the mid 1990s, and they have been surrounded by these abandoned buildings, which does not do much to reassure prospective students or their parents about the desirability of CSUMB as a campus. And as good as the educational opportunity is and how good things are on campus, it just was not the kind of surroundings that that the university system wanted, the students wanted, or the parents wanted. So I think this will go a long way to help the community there on CSUMB feel like they have the kind of environment around them that's a little bit more suitable.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Supervisor Parker. I think this was one of the programs or efforts that was rather unanimous at the FORA board in terms of being a high priority. And so I think quite noteworthy it was. It took many players to get it through. And I think it will result in the region having, for the folks who live in the cities, an improved community landscape, and for the folks who might live on the peninsula, a shinier entrance certainly won't hurt. But I think the benefits will be far and wide, and I know the folks at CSUMB are quite happy to see this money come in. Just to the percentages that were agreed on by the board, it's 52.25% are going to the city of Marina because they have the bulk of the remaining buildings. 34.5% to Seaside. TAMC, the Transportation Agency, Monterey County, gets 7%, and Marina Coast Water District 5.25, and MST, the transit districts, get 1%. Now, why those three agencies are in there is that they all own property actually within the boundaries of the city of Marina, where they have buildings that need to be remediated. So that money will be put to work on those properties, but it will actually accrue to the benefit of the Fort Ord community and Marina as well. So that I think is a great outcome, of this.
Can I interject here, Josh? We have a question from a participant on Facebook who's asking, why wasn't this one of the first actions taken by FORA? Why did it take so long to get to the point where we have the resources to get the blight taken down?
Yeah, that's a great point. Gail, do you want to answer that one, or I'm happy to take it, but you might have a good.
Yeah, let me just say, so initially the concept with funding things happening at FORA was the assumption was made back in the 90s and the early 2000s was that getting down the blight on these properties would happen when a developer came in. So the developer would buy the property and would be responsible for taking down the blight. So one key example that will show how this was to work was where the promontory is, the student housing that's now part of CSUMB. That property, if it had been bare land when the city of Marina sold it, it would have been worth $2.8 million. But to take down the blight on top of that property, the developer said, okay, that's going to cost $1 million to get it down. So instead of paying 2.8 million for the property, the real value was 1.8 million. And that's what the developer paid. And the developer assumed the responsibility for taking down the building. So that was the structure that FORA thought was going to happen. And they thought the value of the land was going to be enough to make a cushion to get the blight down and have the jurisdictions in FORA still make money. And over this decade, what we found is, oh my gosh, these buildings have asbestos, they have all kinds of toxicity, that the cost of just tearing them down isn't just a bulldozer, but you got to go in there, you have to assess what's the hazardous materials, and the removal of that has to happen first for not contaminating the dirt, not contaminating the air, keeping all of us safe, and that was extraordinarily expensive. So the initial idea about, we'll have the developer pay to get down the buildings, the city and FORA will make some money, and the buildings will happen, failed. Because what we found out is the cost of getting all of this stuff down was more than the property was worth in most instances. And the cities have no ability in their general funds. We get our tax dollars. We're paying for police, we're paying for fire, we're paying to keep the lights on. We have no extra money to come in here and say, let me get this land prepared to sell. And FORA by then was so far down the path in this funding structure, it really was too late to make a change. And what they were generating funds for were for the actual, when development happened, now what are we going to do? We're going to put in roads, we're going to take care of habitat, we're going to address other issues that are addressing the impacts of development, but never got to how we structure the actual transference and sale of real estate. So it was a quagmire, and by the time I came on in 2012, we were already way down this path. Jane, you came on in 2008, I think, and way down this path. Josh, you just told us you came on when we were doing a reassessment of the Fort Ord Reuse Authority plan, and we all went, oh my gosh, we've structured this wrong. But by then we were so 14 years into it that we really could not change course. And coming up with this bond issue was a tremendous idea and a savior for all of us.
Yes, and Gail, I want to point out that, you know, you and I were agitating for a while that FORA should really put some more emphasis on getting the blighted buildings down, and we asked the then executive officer to, you know, use his connections and his relationships in Washington to try to find funds, because by then we knew that there were hazardous materials involved, and it was, you know, it was quite the operation. But the thing I didn't know until this opportunity came along was that even if we had thought of this bond issuance idea earlier, because not enough development had happened yet, we wouldn't have been able to generate very much money, if any at all, using that tax increment that you talked about, that little extra amount of money due to the increased value of the land. So we were really in a catch-22 where the old model that had been envisioned clearly wasn't working well enough, but the mechanism of using the bond, if we had done it any earlier than the tippy end here, we wouldn't have had enough money to generate even, I mean, what we're getting now, it's a lot of money, but it's just kind of a down payment on how much it's going to cost to take all of the buildings down. And we would have had such a paltry amount if we had done it earlier. And I really didn't know that until we were engaged on this bond issuance.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Both of those, you know, the way that this question is answered, how much can you generate in a bond issue, is based on this idea of how much the property value on the property will increase over time. And so, but they don't just want to do that sort of on a whim from zero. They want to have a little bit of a track record to go, okay, over the last, 10 years, the property values have increased this much. So the probability, given what is on the table in terms of entitled development and so forth, that it all gives confidence that, it's going to continue to go at a certain rate. And so that the ability to repay the investors in the bond, because this is an investment that bond, these are like large funds, mutual funds and so forth, buy these bonds, and they expect a return on the investment. And so they have to have that confidence, and I think so that is key. And I think also the topic of tax increment was something that is probably non-intuitive for most people. I mean, for me, it's still a little bit squirrely, but generally the idea is that let's say you have every dollar of tax that comes in, there's an increment of that tax that can be used for a specific purpose. And in this case, there was, because of the FORA legislation, a certain increment of tax, property tax, could be used for redevelopment purposes on Fort Ord. Now, this was a common practice for what were known as redevelopment agencies up until 2012, when they were closed by then Governor Brown. So FORA, because it was established under its own legislation and not formally a redevelopment agency, was able then to continue to collect this tax increment and apply it directly to projects on Fort Ord. A lot of that had to do with things like Imgen Parkway and 2nd Avenue and General Jim Moore Boulevards, road construction projects that were then intended to accommodate this future traffic demand. So when FORA goes away next Tuesday night at 5 o'clock, or maybe midnight, but probably 5 o'clock for me anyway, that ability to accrue that tax increment will no longer exist. And what was unique in this moment with FORA, the defining legislation says, all debts that are established prior to FORA sunset will be honored and repaid through this long-lasting access to this tax increment. So had we not been able to do all the steps and go through all the twists and turns that were necessary to get it done 2 weeks ago or 10 days ago, that opportunity would have not been available to us. So I think it really is a testament to the direction of the board to direct staff and pull this whole team together. Not cheap in itself, just to fund the team that put it together, all of the attorneys and tax people and so forth. But in the end, it brings in this money that will be used to take down buildings, that will be used to settle the CalPERS termination liability of FORA, and will then, pave the way for the possibility of faster economic development. I think there is a good point also that you raised, Jane, which is the potential for federal support, federal funds to become available or be pursued to be used in this purpose. And I know folks in the Building and Construction Trades Council have been active in advocating for to Congressman Panetta's office about this potential. The local community here has brought in this money. If we could then find a source to pair with federal money, that might be another source of additional funds. So there is still work to be done, but this is a significant step for sure.
That's great.
So just to put some value on this, FORA in the last few years has been collecting about $2.9 million a year in tax increment. And so what happens when you get a bond is you encumber that 2.9 million, and that's what pays the bond. The bond is like a loan. So we're getting the cash up front and we have to make annual payments. So part of this is FORA sunsetting. So it was using a portion of that money, 1.3 million, for its just overhead costs. They're going away. So now we have that money. We have that 2.9 million that we have a good record that our bond went out and said, oh, we're going to get paid back because you have this tax increment to send as payments every single month. It's like paying interest, the principal and interest on a home mortgage, except it's a bond and it's the public's tax money. But the part that I want to drive home to everybody that's a homeowner and terrified, oh my gosh, every time you pass a school bond or you pass a bond, you see that assessment on your tax bill that comes July and April, that's due December and April. And this is already in that. You've been paying it for 26 years, and it's actually assessed only on those properties within the footprint of the former Fort Ord. And so it's, as those new homes come on, that's what's increasing the tax, what's in that tax increment. You get a new home, they're paying property taxes, they're contributing to this. So all of us are just seeing this as an absolute windfall because this would have just gone away in the city of Marina. Any share of taxes, we've already pledged that we would give it to Marina Community Partners. So it's not changing our city revenues, but what we're able to do with these bond proceeds will change what we get in the future. And we're so excited.
Yeah, and Gail, would you talk a little bit about the areas where the city of Marina is focusing on taking the buildings down, and if you have any particular projects or facilities for the public that will be made available as a result?
So the bond, one of the key things at the very last minute, we said we not only need to think about the ability to take down blighted buildings, but we need to think about, can we salvage buildings that are still usable? So for us in the city of Marina, as you know, by the VA DOD clinics, there's 2 long warehouses. One of them is owned by TAMC and one of them is owned by the city of Marina. And in our specific plan, that's supposed to be developed into an arts district. So the city of Marina, its long skinny warehouse there that parallels Highway 1 just before you cross over to Stillwell Lookout, we want to reaffirm that building. We want to protect it. We want to stabilize it so that's available to us for a city-wide arts district in the future. TAMC owns the one next to us. It will be getting its share of money to address that building as well. We own the park, the Water City roller hockey, the swimming pool that just looks like a giant building. We've stabilized those buildings, but now with this bond issuance that we may be looking at, how do you make that area into a park? There are 108 barracks. I don't know how many barracks there are just to the south of that. And this money will allow us to get those torn down and at least get started on a public park. Fedeck Hill is being cleared by a developer, not using these bond proceeds, but there are 2 rows of barracks there that we need to take down because those are still ours. City Council is going to be addressing how do we prioritize, where do we go with this fund, because it won't do it all. And we're trying to address what's going to have the biggest impact on the city for what will inspire future growth, will attract businesses, attract other sources of revenues that will enable us to keep this ball rolling and not have it just stagnate. So when that comes on the city council agenda, I'm inviting everybody to come tell us. The CSUMB president serves on the FORA board. He has said, I want my students to come to CSUMB and not see these buildings along 2nd Avenue. And we hear that in the city of Marina, that the university is very important to us, and making sure that the corridor between our city proper and the university is free of this blight will go a long way. So there's a lot of coordination and input that I think Seaside us are really looking at on how to address. And the impact's good for everybody.
That's, yeah, it's terrific. And in fact, we have a couple questions about CSUMB, and maybe between the two of you, you and Josh, you can answer this. So there's a question about when FORA goes away, what will be the impact on CSUMB? Will they still be able to grow? And then it sounds like too, there's another question about how will the classes at CSUMB be impacted by the bond. So I think maybe that, I don't know if that has to do with the noise or just, but anyway, so interest in how this is going to affect CSUMB.
So CSUMB, thankfully, and if it's a student that lives there now, probably doesn't know this, but CSUMB used to have its fair share of buildings, and the state of California put $30 million into taking down old buildings that are on former Fort Ord, that were within the footprint of CSUMB. CSUMB doesn't answer to FORA. The president is on the FORA board, but the regional plan that governs Fort Ord Reuse Authority, CSUMB is not dependent upon that. Your university gets to plan and do its growth outside of what the Fort Ord Reuse Authority planned and does. It doesn't mean that we're mutually exclusive in the sense that not all of us talk to each other and try to coordinate these plans, but CSUMB came up with a master plan in about 2016, I think, was when it was circulated. Maybe you remember, Josh, but it came up with its master plan for growth, and it has a plan to add students. It has targets that it's going to hit for the expansion of students. And the funding for all of that and the growth in buildings comes within the CSU system and not from this bond or from anything that Marina does or the county does or Seaside does. So I urge you to take a look at your master plan, and you'll see where the growth is all planned throughout your footprint. And under Dr. Ochoa's leadership, wisely, when that plan was looked at compared to what was initially enacted, he had the concept that we need to concentrate our growth in a more localized kind of plan, taking into account all of what we know about walkable neighborhoods and green emissions and different things that are environmentally detrimental. So the plan changed quite a bit, and it also includes growth of students that are taking classes online. That is a document you should look at, especially if you're interested in how that's going to go forward.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Gail. And I think, Josh, you may have something you want to add here. I think the main thing that we can say in a general way is that CSUMB was allocated its land and its space, and that is still there, even when FORA sunsets. CSUMB's campus and the amount of space they have to grow and expand is still there. And as Gail mentioned, there is a greater commitment now to having the footprint be a little bit more compact instead of taking up all the space, right away. So Josh, anything you want to add about CSUMB?
Yeah, sure. I think to the point of the land transfers that you just remarked on, Jane, one of the core functions of FORA originally, it was set up to basically be the single point of contact from the U.S. Army, the federal government, to a local state representative, and then distribute the land to underlying owners. So in this case, it was CSU Monterey Bay, other cases, the city of Marina, the city of Seaside, the county, and so forth. And then it was those entities that would undertake the process of doing the development that they dreamed about coming up in their general plans or the master plan in the case of CSUMB, and move ahead with those developments. Now, The CSU campus system is unique to, it's not a city, it's a state university campus. So in terms of how it can go about doing development under California state law, it's got some unique abilities. It's considered a sovereign entity of the state, so it doesn't necessarily have to coordinate with local government, local city government. That can often lead to a thing called a town and gown divide, but I think really by way of the relationships that have been supported and rather cultivated through the FORA experiment, you know, there has been a great amount of coordination that's in ongoing now between the campus and the cities, both cities and the county. So, you know, I think that's a positive outcome of the process. And, you know, while some may argue the effectiveness of the whole thing, I think from my seat, you know, some of the relationships and kind of history of working together will pay dividends going forward, even without FORA as a convening entity. And so, yeah, with the buildings coming down around the campus, that'll do a lot to make it a safer, happier place for families to come bring their kids to see about a future. I mean, you know, it's a pretty amazing site, like this 1,400 acre beautiful state university campus right on the edge of the National Marine Sanctuary in the Monterey Bay. I mean, you know, as a student, you can walk down to the beach, right? You know, there's only a few campuses like that, you know, UC Santa Barbara maybe, but I mean, this will be a amazing facility. So taking those buildings down will help that. It'll also help the economic development activity around the campus, which, you know, as you know, many people, you know, campuses create a unique cultural experience in the cities where they're located. They provide, you know, back and forth kind of two-way influence with students and faculty living and breathing life into the vitality of the community. So I think any way that cities can have a closer connection to the campus, you know, you look at UCLA and Westwood, look at, you know, UC Berkeley and Telegraph Avenue. I don't know if that's a great example. It is, because I went there, lucky for me, but I think it's a great example of a close coordination between the town and the city that's created this really great cultural thing. So if I was going to look into the future, you know, that's what I would hope to see happening along 2nd Avenue, in Marina, along Giggling Road in Seaside, where Campus Town will be built. I mean, there's just a tremendous future around here that at least from where I'm sitting, I'm going, you know, taking these buildings down is really going to be a momentum generator for that future to come into reality. So.
Yeah, I think so. And there are a few questions here I want to do fairly rapid fire. I was hoping that we would have Mayor Oglesby here, but I'm not seeing him yet. So maybe, Josh, there's a question about whether Campus Town in Seaside is going to be a beneficiary of the bond.
Yes, it definitely will. The area that the City of Seaside is primarily focused on with the expenditure of their bond revenue is the remaining barracks. They're the Vietnam War era barracks at the end of Giggling Road, and I think it's 6th or 7th Avenue there. I think there's about 8 or 9 of these buildings left, and they cost about $1 million each to take down. They're multi-story steel and rebar, or steel and cement buildings, and so those will come down, and Campus Town then will follow. So directly it will benefit from
That's
the
great.
bond.
That's great. And maybe, Gail, you can talk a little bit about this. There's a question about whether in the process of the developments that that you have planned, and maybe Josh, you have a sense for what Seaside has planned, whether there are opportunities to develop childcare centers or family resource centers or any other kind of child or youth development needs, you know, kind of to help support the families in our area. Any thoughts about what might be coming in that regard?
So that's the whole idea about walkable neighborhoods that our regional urban design guidelines that the FORA, Fort Ord Reuse Authority paid for, was trying to educate all the jurisdictions as you go forth in your planning on what is an attractive neighborhood. And people want their homes that you can come outside and walk 5 minutes, so you're at the dry cleaners, you're at the child care facility, you're at your place of work. And that network and that thinking is what the city of Marina, at least, is trying to develop. We looked at and approved a specific plan for development that we're coordinated with the UC system at our airport property, which is part within the former Fort Ord. And that's one of the things that we definitely talked about in the specific plan. It's not only having research and development where people are going to go work, but you're going to have the childcare right there in the same proximity. So if I go to work and my child needs to come to a childcare, they're minutes away, as opposed to they're back next to my home where I live. So yes, we're trying very hard to have that lens as we go forward and to make these neighborhoods more compact, more dense, more services, intermixed, that it's not residential housing over here and commercial. Now, I acknowledge that we're 26 years down this path. And when we look at the development of the Dunes project, for example, where the REI, Target, Bed Bath & Beyond, that was slated to be mixed use. Mixed use meaning housing mixed in with retail and commercial and business space. It doesn't look like that. And I can only apologize. I wasn't there when those votes and designs happened, but we're much smarter now. And we're trying to make sure we change what it looks like when we do the promontory, which is the piece of property in front of the movie theater. What can we make that look like to make it more integrated? We have not approved plans for that particular area. And again, while we have the airport that we just approved a specific plan where we're saying, let's think the right way when we do this and go forward. So it's coming, and it's your voices that keep all of us answering to what you want. Land is a limited commodity, and we're very grateful, as is the county, Seaside, to get this great gift of property. And we have a fiduciary responsibility to make sure that we plan not only for today, but for 2050, for the needs in the future, and that we don't squander it on bad vision. So thank you for the question. Keep bringing that home to all your elected officials.
Thank you. Thanks, Gail. We have about 10 minutes left, and there are two infrastructure sort of questions. One is traffic on Imgen is really bad. What plans and what funding will address that traffic when there's more growth that is coming? And then another infrastructure question is, was FORA able to do anything about communications on Fort Ord? Cell reception is really bad. So you can choose among you who wants to answer those questions.
So Imgen, I'll just start, and then Josh, you can add, is that we are in the process, City of Marina is in the process of widening that to 4 lanes all the way. Right now, 4 lanes when you come from off of Highway 1 to Abrams, but it needs to be 4 lanes getting out to Reservation Road. And that is well slated in our plans and funds. We work with TAMC, there's contributions from tax measures other than the Fort Ord Reuse Authority for the payment of that to happen. And so we're anticipating those plans will include roundabouts rather than stop signs. We're trying to address that it's not run at 40 miles an hour and then stop at a signal light. Now squeeze down to 1 lane and feel horrible. And we understand that, and we're addressing that as quickly as we can. And the second part of that question that I already asked him.
Cell phone reception.
Cell phone connection, I find that to be, I don't live in the new part of former Fort Ord, the Dunes housing or Marina Heights housing, but I drive on Highway 1 and I lose a telephone call once or twice a day because I drive into an office and I drive home, and it's horrible. And I don't know the answer, but I would be, if I bought a home and part of the representation was I was going to have cell service, I'd be talking to the developer. Where is my cell service? And
Really?
I wish that the jurisdictions had some say over that, but we're only one more voice as are yours. We do have cell towers throughout Marina. We try to support the adequacy of the infrastructure, but why it doesn't work or where it's failing is beyond the scope of the city's jurisdiction.
Yeah. Josh, any sense about the cell phone?
You know, I would kind of echo Gail's remarks. We've had inquiries about cell towers over the years. Our role has simply been to facilitate access to information about where potential sites are, and then work with, you know, the individual jurisdictions in getting through their permitting processes. You know, but it's really the you know, cell towers are generally the property of the telecommunications companies, and so they need to come and lease access to land to put up a tower. And so I think it really is about kind of you know, adding your voice to the chorus of if it's your cell phone provider, you might say, Verizon, I live here and I have this problem, you know, help me fix it. And that kind of gets to the question of how many rooftops you have, how many people living there, how many customers they have, all those kinds of questions that are somewhat, you know, unsatisfying to hear, but in the way, you know, we don't have publicly owned cell tower infrastructure to my knowledge. And so it's really something put out by the companies who provide those services.
Thank you. And one of our participants is bringing up the example of Gonzales. I don't know if you've seen the coverage on that, but they have done a really great job. They actually paid for their the cost of their residents to be connected to cable and broadband.
Yeah.
And then, of course, as we're seeing with COVID-19, we see the digital divide in the county. But and Gonzales has just been such a leader. I did want to just bring up a couple of other questions we've got here. There's a question about whether the bond will help with affordable housing in any way.
Yeah, I mean, I would just take a moment, then I know Gail will have more to say about this, but just getting the buildings down will reduce the impediments to development and thereby provide for faster pace of development and the ability for cities and developers to work together to provide specifically, you know, affordable housing, capital A. You know, there's a whole, we could have a whole one of these sessions on what affordable means, but anything you can do to reduce the cost and the time of development will improve, ideally, its affordability. You know, and I think in I just put a little asterisk by that and say we live in a marketplace that is, you know, the boundaries of which are far beyond our local jurisdictions. We have, you know, we're influenced by market trends that are bigger than us. So that's the one caveat that I would put there. We live on the west coast of California with a very limited band of coastal real estate that could be developed. So that's one of the challenges. But
so part of the plan for former Fort Ord was that for every home, there's a ratio of how many affordable housing units you had to build if you're going to build market rate houses. So for example, the Dunes, they actually, Marina Community Partners, in developing, again, now I'm talking about REI and the homes that are near that shopping mall, there's 108 affordable units. And in the city of Marina, those affordable units got built first before the market rate. And I feel very good that that is what occurred. Affordable, that's a capital A program. That's where you pay a percentage of income towards rent because your income is below the county median. What we're missing in some of our planning is housing that is affordable, and how you get that is affordable by design. So instead of having giant homes that you're spending 800, 900,000 for, is where's the market rate home that somebody that earns $70,000 a year can afford a $300,000 home. That home in our neighborhoods, in our region, necessarily is going to be a smaller home. It might be a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom. And again, that's the concept that goes into planning. And when we approve plans and what's approved, that mixed use, that idea that you're going to have those smaller homes and they're intermixed, maybe there's a second story above retail or above commercial space. That is where those things need to happen. The caveat with the former Fort Ord, as Jane knows and Josh knows, when we looked at this reassessment of where we were back in 2013, 2014, we realized that in some ways the plan that got devised kind of defeated that purpose. We only have limited water resources. We have a cap on the number of houses throughout the former Fort Ord. And so developers were saying, well, we want to build that $800,000 to $900,000 house because we want to recapture profit. And pushback comes from the cities that are saying, we want our residents to be able to afford a home. And that struggle continues to get addressed every time a project comes in front of us as a council, in front of the Board of Supervisors. FORA is going away, they don't do development. But we are continuing to look at that. We know the need not only for affordable housing, which is a subsidized program, but also this mixed issue of housing that is affordable. So when you graduate from CSUMB and you got that first job and you're making $50,000 to $70,000 and you don't need a 4-bedroom, 3-bath house because you don't have the kids and everything that comes with that responsibility. It's you and a partner, and you just need that studio or that 1-bedroom. That's where we need to do better. And we're trying. I see Jane nodding her head because she's participated in these discussions over and over. Josh has with us in being at where we're at a common meeting at Fort Ord Reuse Authority. But I'm hoping we will do better. I'm hoping plans coming forward will continue to address these issues.
Thank you, Gail. Yeah, I think there's a lot of community interest in making sure that our residents, the people who work here, can afford to live here. And, you know, as we're seeing with COVID-19, some of the reason that there is such high transmission rate happening in some parts of Salinas is because families are doubled and tripled and quadrupled up in houses or apartments. And that is just a petri dish for disease transmission. So we have come to the end of our time. So I want to thank both Josh Metz and Councilmember Gail Morton for being here and talking with us about this exciting chapter of really being able to remove some of those abandoned buildings through that bond issuance and a number of other issues we also were able to cover. There are two things I'd like to do. One is I'm hoping, Wendy, that you might be able to put up either a link to or the page that has information about the social expansion of social, what is it called? Social gatherings. If you could put that up for our participants. And then there was a question too about what is the way that we should celebrate FORA and FORA's sunset. And my thought is go for a walk on Fort Ord in an oak woodland, but maybe Gail and Josh, we don't really have much time left, but if you want to give a phrase for how you think people could celebrate FORA, that would be terrific, and then we'll sign off.
So I will just say the two people that are straddling me in the pictures that I'm looking at, Jane Parker, Chair of Fort Ord Reuse Authority, a director there long before I got elected and had the pleasure of serving on the Fort Ord Reuse Authority board, and Josh Metz, who's had 3 different positions in the 6 years that I have worked with him, are my 2 favorite people at FORA and have been such a voice of reason and putting forward not just the easiest party lines, but really trying to help support, at least as an advocate for the city of Marina, of what's really best regionally, not just a single voice, but hearing all the voices and advocating for that. And your leadership, Jane, has been tremendous for me as a learner, and then also being a partner in advocacy and what we have been able to change for the better, as have you, Josh. And I'm so grateful that you've been there in the last 6 months to help us get over the finish line. So that walk, and I have thought about, Josh, if you're walking out at 5 o'clock on Tuesday, that I might be standing outside just to give you that distance high five or that distance hug. I thank you. I thank you. I thank you. It has been such a refreshment from the standpoint that I know you're listening. And Jane, I hope you would join me in doing that perhaps. But that walk, I know we're going to do those over and over and over. And I look forward to participating with both of you in something that does that. We've done a tremendous job. The National Monument is a tribute to all of us. The 4 tag trails that's going to attach all of our cities to that national monument and to the Marine Sanctuary is a tribute to the work that we've done. There's more to do, but we have set some structures, the bones of the vision in place. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Gail, for that. And I would just agree. I think you know how I would look to celebrate what FORA has accomplished is to encourage keeping the momentum going and continue, you know, working towards this walkable, bikeable, you know, ideal that I think has been there for a long time and just will, you know, continue to need attention and involvement from the community and advocacy. But I agree. I think that the bones are there. The foundation for moving ahead is really there. And, you know, this bond piece, really taking these buildings down is going to be a major impetus for that. And, you know, there's exciting things going on with the growth of the campus, with the 2 big developments now that are going to be moving forward, the Dunes and the Campus Town projects, and the other ones in Marina, of course, Marina Heights, Sea Haven now. But then also out at the Marina Airport, you know, Joby Aviation represents an incredible new emerging industry that we really have one of the leaders in the world here. And if we can work to secure their future and to you know, integrate them into the community and the region, you know, there's wonderful future there with great jobs and kind of the higher earning and the local presence. And so there's so much going on. I'm really quite hopeful for what's to come after FORA. So I just say, keep it all going, people, and, you know, have a great time.
Yeah. Thank you, Josh. We really appreciate the role that you've played. And some of our commenters are really expressing appreciation for both you, Gail, and you, Josh. And so thank you so much for being here. And Wendy has put the information about social circles in the chat. And I encourage people to follow the link to find the ways that you and your family can expand your circles safely. And so stay safe, be kind, and we'll see you next week. Thanks so
All right.
much, everybody.
Bye-bye.